in the governmental world, what's going on, and et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people done lost their damn job. Lot of people done lost their damn job. As a man who does federal security, I can tell you they briefed us about it 4 days ago. They came in, told us, my captain and my project manager came and talked to all of us and was letting us know, hey man, just letting y'all know, a lot of termination notices are being handed out at a lot of the offices that y'all are working at. So just know shit might go bad pretty soon. Be prepared. Be prepared for bomb threats. Be prepared for active shooters. The active shooter was crazy, but he did say be prepared to kick some people out. So let's talk about it. And contrary to popular belief, these layoffs do not just solely affect IRS. These affect a lot of different departments. The Department of Education, I'm hearing word that there were some layoffs there. The Department of Veteran Affairs, I'm hearing word that there were some quote-unquote non-mission critical layoffs there. As far as the IRS, from what I'm understanding, the number is to grow. There have been at least 7,000 layoffs of IRS probationary workers in the last, I'll say about 8 days or so. I can tell you at my job, we got notice about it. At my job, my project manager and my captain came in and let us know, hey, for sure, at a lot of these offices that we are doing security at, there are going to be a lot of disgruntled employees, a lot of termination notices being handed out. Please be vigilant. Please be vigilant, because this is when shit start going left. I do security for like these offices. That's why I know about this kind of stuff. To be fair, they're saying that a lot of the probationary workers that they are laying off at the IRS are not critical to the filing period. I'm hearing different word from some IRS workers. A lot of IRS workers are saying, well, whether they not be critical to the filing time or not, that still don't mean that might not cause some hiccups and some things. If you were to ask my personal opinion, as a man who's done security for the IRS office in Stockton, as well as the IRS office in Sacramento, this is my personal opinion. I get saving money. I get you are getting rid of some of these probationary employees because, hey, it might be a waste in some aspect, particularly if you're talking about certain programs. I'm biased with that because they made it clear that when they say probationary employees, they're focusing on the ones that have not been hired by the IRS for longer than a year or two. Now, pause with that. To even get a job with the IRS as a customer representative, technically speaking, you need a bachelor's degree or something like that to that effect. Where I don't like that argument is because, bro, I ain't gonna hold you. Some of y'all know, this ain't nothing new. A lot of the worst some of the worst people that are working, that are employed at these goddamn IRS offices are people who are not probationary employees. If you've ever owed taxes before, you know what I'm talking about. I do security for Stockton IRS. I've done it. A lot of the worst motherfuckers that sit at that goddamn desk be motherfuckers who've been there for 10, 20, 30 years. And what a lot of y'all don't know is half of them are about to retire. Half of them are about to retire right now. So some of those probationary employees, I don't know if you're firing them solely because they might be in some aspect of programs that doesn't serve any critical purpose to filing period or recovering income. Or are you saying you're firing this because it's an excess? And even when it comes to that, bro, some of y'all know, bro, I've owed taxes before. And I can tell you, when you deal with the IRS with anything outside of paying back what you owe, they take very long. Very long. It's a headache. So I feel like you shortening the workforce there is kind of negative. Right now, they have me stationed at the courthouse right now, so I'm not dealing with Stockton IRS or Sacramento IRS as much as I used to. But I can tell you, my project manager, and I can tell you, my captain, they for sure let us know, hey, be vigilant, shit's about to go wrong. When you start going off to some of his layoffs and other aspects of the federal government, some of this shit I get. Some of it I get. And when I say this, a lot of y'all are going to get upset. When he decided to lay off, talking about Elon Musk, when they decided to lay off 1,000 people hired by the Department of Veteran Affairs, to a certain extent, I get that. Don't y'all get mad. Let me explain. From what I understand, it's 1,000 non-mission critical probationary workers for the Department of Veteran Affairs that he laid off. And I understand, because who gives a fuck about veterans, right? That was sarcastic. But when I was reading some of the positions, some of these programs that a lot of them had, researchers working on cancer treatment, opioid addiction, prosthetics, burn pit exposure, pause. least 2 of those we ain't seen no fucking progress within the last 10 years. I'm gonna be honest with you. So, do I think veterans matter? Yeah, I care about veterans. I for surely care about veterans. But if you're just, like, if you have an excess of hundreds of people employed to work on cancer treatment, and in the last 30 to 40 years, I'm a little bit stupid when it comes to that. I haven't seen any progress to that. It's kind of like, for example, when you go to like a grocery store, and when you're done making a purchase, they ask you, hey, would you like to donate $1 or $2 to breast cancer research or AIDS or HIV, et cetera, et cetera? Do I think those are all things that are important? Yeah, but it is something to be said about we've been donating dollar after dollar after dollar after dollar after dollar, and we ain't figured out how to fix shit when it comes to a lot of these ailments. So I do kind of get that. A lot of the federal programs that Elon Musk was talking about cutting, and I didn't list all of them here just because it'd be a whole long conversation. Some of the stuff I get because the mission in of itself sounds good. The mission in of itself sounds like a great mission. But then if you just keep throwing money, and we ain't seen no progress with none of that, to give you a better example, we all live in California, at least most of you guys who watch me right now. How many millions of dollars have we thrown to homeless programs in the state of California? And I ain't seen a lesser number of homeless people. Oh my God. Like, it feels like the more money you throw to homeless programs, the problem gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So I look at some of the federal programs that do have like that. It's kind of fucked up. It's kind of fucked up because, listen, the Department of Veteran Affairs, they do. But even, it's kind of funny because it's kind of funny. Like, you always talk about how much we devalue veterans in this country. But at the same time, you have all these programs that we've been throwing millions and millions of dollars to. And, opioid addiction amongst veterans is still a problem. Homelessness amongst veterans is still a problem. The homelessness aspect, I guess that applies to the Department of Veteran Affairs. I know about that because one of the officers, so let me just say this because some of y'all be getting, what I do. So I'm a federal security guard. I do federal security. All of these offices that I'm talking about, we do security for. Stockton IRS, Sacramento IRS, the veterans, the Veterans Benefits Office over there got in Rancho, the Social Security Office. So we deal with all of these kind of conversations. Like every time, the funniest thing is every single time the boat gets shaken a little bit, trust me, we get noticed. Like I said, like I told y'all, I keep telling y'all, my project manager and my captain, they told us all, gave us notice and everything, letting us know, hey, a lot of termination notices are being handed out at a lot of the offices that y'all are standing guard at. Be vigilant, be careful. You might have to detain a lot of people. You might have to not hurt, but you get what I'm saying. So be concerned about that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, is this going to bring more money into our government? Is this going to make us more efficient as a country? It's hard to say. I do know they said with the layoffs, the Department of Veteran Affairs, that would save the country like $93 million per year or something like that. Something to that effect, like $93 million. So, hey, you're saving us money. So it is saving us money. Some would argue, yeah, at the cost of trying to help our veterans. True, but to be fair, from what I understand, the layoffs, the 1,000 non-mission critical the 1,000 layoffs at the Department of Veteran Affairs, from what I understand, they're quote unquote non-mission critical probationary workers. Non-mission critical as far as like, but then it's weird because in that same token, they said, in that same note, they said that these were non-mission critical probationary workers, but then they also said that these were all researchers who were working on cancer treatment, opioid addiction, prosthetics, and the burn pit exposure. But, my response to that would be, well, hell, have you made progress in any of those areas? Like, it feels like the opioid crisis is still growing. The homelessness issue, particularly amongst veterans, is still growing. So I don't see the effectiveness in that at all. Just being real with you. With the Department of Education, I saw, this got to be a higher number, but in my notes, I saw they fired 30. Let me not laugh because the 39 that they fired, that's 39 people who have to find a new. Where I feel fucked up about this is because a lot of these probationary workers will become permanent employees. And like I said earlier about the IRS, and I'm telling you, as somebody who's a federally contracted guard, I've stood guard at all these offices in the Northern California area. I can tell you, we can all agree that federal workers are some of the laziest, motherfuckers to ever hold a job and get paid $32 or $31 an hour, whatever they paying the motherfuckers. And I feel bad because a lot of that new blood that you need is some of these probationary workers. I'm telling you, like, you need somebody's, like, you need a lot of, it goes back to my earlier point with the IRS. A lot of the worst IRS employees, every time I had to kick somebody out of an office, at an IRS office, every single time I had to kick somebody out or kind of assert myself a little bit, I can tell you it was usually 98% of the time because the goddamn IRS workers start talking crazy to like the individual. Well, I don't care how you're going to process the payment. You need to, well, I'm not, you need, like they would talk so fucking crazy to them. With that being said, none of them are getting laid off. None of them are getting laid off. They're perfectly fine. Those tend to be the ones who've been there for 20, 30 years. When you deal with people who work at the IRS, a lot of these federal jobs, you gotta remember, like, particularly in California, there was an era where, like, people really value you getting a federal job, even just a state job, and you would hold on to it. So a lot of them been working for 20, 30, 40 years. They tired of dealing with the bullshit. They're tired of it. So I understand where you being employed in that field can burn you for a while and have you feel like, bro, like I'm tired of this. I don't feel like dealing with it. I get that. But you just have to learn how to talk to people better. That's my main thing. You have to talk to people. You have to learn how to talk to people better. Like, that's a really big thing. Particularly in my field, because since we're kind of conflict management or conflict resolution, you being able to take a person from 10 down is a very, very good skill. And I can tell you, most federal workers do not have that skill. Be it at the SSA or be at the IRS. Now, with me also saying that, most of them that I'm talking about are not the probationary workers. And to be fair, a lot of those probationary workers, I don't know how many that they are laying off, be it in the Department of Veteran Affairs, be it at the Department of IRS. I don't know how many of them are not the ones who are ones who will become full-time employees, because reality is at all of our jobs, you do have to have a probationary period. Even with me trying to go into law enforcement right now, they let me know there's a 13-month probationary period when I get going to that. The department I signed my job offer for, they let me know that. So, it is what it is. So I praise everybody out there. I know there's some people in there who probably are federal employees. I'm not talking bad about y'all. It's all love, et cetera, et cetera. Without y'all pissing people off, without y'all not knowing how to talk to people, I would not have a job. So, hey, listen, it's love. Y'all do what y'all do, but just know, I hope that y'all take from these layoffs the knowledge to how to learn to start talking to people just a little bit better. Just a little bit. That's all I ask. Now that we're done about that, let's talk about the racism. The really good topic. I put a post earlier in the group talking about these signs they used to have in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, shot to the boot, saying no dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans. No dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans. This was in the era, 1960s and below, when you could just be blatantly racist toward Mexicans and blacks and dogs. And it made me laugh to my heart's content, seeing how triggered some of y'all got in the comments saying, why would you even talk about that? Why would you even bring that up? This is what keeps our country racist, is two people talking about what occurred in our country's history. You shouldn't talk about what happened in our country's history. You shouldn't talk about that. So I do not like revisionist history. And I do not like us living in a country where we act like shit did not happen. Do you know why, when they had those Confederate statues, do you know why I was against taking down those statues? Like about a few years ago, particularly around the George Floyd era, when they kept saying, take down all the Confederate statues, take down the statue of Robert E. Lee. I said, no, leave those statues up. Leave those statues up. Leave all of that shit up, because you need people to know that. Don't take down I went to Robert E. Lee High School in Montgomery, Alabama. You need to let people know, hey, we genuinely looked at this person as a hero. You need to let people know, hey, there was a time where these high schools that we all have in Montgomery, Alabama, and they have in Louisiana and Georgia, let them know that these are all named after people who own slaves and want to keep slavery alive. And it's the same conversation when you talk about racism. I very rarely bring up civil rights, Jim Crow, et cetera, and all that other stuff. I rarely do. Although I think you should do it. But I do get annoyed that when I do bring that up, people, particularly white people, get so sensitive and be like, oh my God, no, this is what's keeping racism alive in our country. This is what's building separatism, et cetera, et cetera. We can't bring that up, but then Jewish people can bring up the Holocaust every goddamn Thursday or Friday. Ain't that some shit? Ain't that some shit? It's wild. When we talk about the Jim Crow era, when we talk about all of that stuff, it's not like it's that far removed from us. It's not like it's that far removed from us. My grandmother grew up in that era. My grandmama was born in Knoxville, South Carolina. My grandmama told me she remembers sitting in the back of the bus. She remember going to the black water fountains, the white water fountains. None of this shit is from a long time ago. So you're not talking about something that was 400 and 500 years ago. Even one of you guys, and much love to her because she's a homie, she's a good woman. Shout out to her. She brought up the whole slavery. She's like, well, we can bring one of y'all. I ain't gonna say her name, but she was like, you know, two things can be true. We've made a lot of progress unless slavery is a thing. We're not talking about slavery. I very rarely, if ever, bring up slavery because to a certain extent, I feel like that was too long ago. I usually bring up shit that I can tell you even today still affects us. Now, have we made progress as a country? Yes. Yes. Is racism still a problem in this country? I'm going to hold you what I deal with more in my life, particularly in Galt. So let me just start with Galt. I very rarely dealt with racism in Galt. I have dealt with prejudice. I've dealt with prejudice more maybe in Lodi than Galt, but I've dealt with that. That's normal because we all have our prejudices. And when you start making a bigger conversation in terms of like from the black person's perspective, the prejudice you might deal with when you deal with law enforcement, the prejudice you might deal with if you're the only black kid at an all-white school or only black person in certain fields, et cetera, et cetera. You're always going to have a little bit of that because humans are just a prejudice in general. When you talk about extreme racism, I can say that's still alive in this country. I think what happens is it's kind of like a game of musical chairs. I'm 30 years old, and we're going to take the conversation away from blacks. Because a lot of the time when you talk about racism, people think it only applies to blacks and Mexicans. And it doesn't. It don't just apply to blacks and Mexicans. You can be racist to whites. You can be racist to Middle Easterns. And I can tell you, when I was growing up, see, I grew up in the 9/11 era. Those of y'all who were kids in the 9/11 era, you know what I'm talking about. When 9/11 happened, when I was in school, there were Middle Eastern kids and there were Indian kids. And I can tell you, anybody here who's Middle Eastern or Indian can tell you, they got treated fucked up. I mean, fucked up. When 9/11 happened, I remember, bro, they used to beat up the Middle Eastern kids at school. They used to be racist as fuck to them. The ones who own liquor stores used to go in there and talk crazy to them. Like, if you talk about racism and you move the conversation from blacks and Mexicans, it's still alive in our country. Because I can tell you, when I was growing up, there were a lot of Middle Eastern Americans and Indian Americans who got treated fucked up. Like, it was bad. There was a lot of Indian officers, a lot of Middle Eastern officers, police officers who can tell you when they got assigned to their department, they used to get all these fucking racist jokes. I remember one officer told me he went into, he went in the break room and they put like some kind of shit. Like, it was something where they said he was going to bring a bomb or et cetera, et cetera. Like, it was wild. And I bring this up because the title that I put when I was going to talk about this was how you handle racism. I respect Indian Americans and Middle Eastern Americans so much because I love, if any of y'all are watching this right now who might be Middle Eastern, namaste or namaste marhaba, I love how they handled racism. They handled racism way better than blacks handled it and Mexicans handled it. Because when all that shit was going on, when they were beating up Middle Eastern kids at school, when they were beating up Indian kids at school, when they were putting bomb threats and shit to all the mosques and etc. that they have in California, whoop and all that other stuff, right? And to be fair, for those who do not know, no Indians were not involved with 9/11, but a lot of people would look at Indians the same as you look at Middle Easterns, right? And I was a kid when all this was happening. And it always boggles me that there was never an Indian Lives Matter movement. There was never a Middle Eastern Lives Matter movement. There was none of that shit. You know what they kept doing? They kept coming over here, opening businesses, buying liquor stores, opening doctor's offices. That motherfucker who owns that gas station off of Simmerhorn, who owns a dental office right by Rayleigh's, who owns another dental office in Elk Grove. When you go to Lodi, and Lodi racist for sure, all them goddamn Pakistanis that are out there, They didn't open up mosques. They didn't open up all these businesses out there. The reason why I respect it so much, how Middle Easterns and how Indians handle racism, was because they said, okay, fuck it. We gonna keep sending our kids to these schools where you call them a bunch of racist saying N-words and beating them up and et cetera, et cetera. If you wanted to play that game, cool. We are going to get so much power in this country. We're going to open up business. We're going to get it to the point where whether you like it or not, you have to deal with us. You have to deal with us. When you talk about gentrification in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area being gentrified, a lot of neighborhoods that used to be all black and Latino, they're there. Now, we ain't talked about the Indian gentrification in the Bay Area. They didn't came to the Bay Area. They didn't gentrify the shit out of it. When you talk about like how Indians are able to come here easier, there's a program they have. I always freaking forget the name, and I should know this because I talk about it all the time. There's an engineering program. So one of the reasons we have so many Indian doctors, Indian engineers, and software engineers is because there are certain programs that you have in this country where if you are from a different country, but you have a master's, you have a doctorate, if you're already employed in this field and you want to come over here, it's so much easier. That's how so many Indians, Pakistanis, and Middle East, that's how a lot of them keep coming over here. Then they come over here, then their family come over here, and whoop-de-whoop. And I respect that because to me, that's how you handle racism. You get to a point where you have so much power, you have so much buying power. That's like, well, bro, hey, you got to deal with me. You got to deal with me regardless. Hey, listen, at the end of the day, you might hate Indians, but when you go to this doctor's office, you got to deal with us. To me, that's how you handle it. I did a live a few weeks ago, and I was talking about black law enforcement. I actually just signed my job offer, my conditional job offer for a police department. I ain't gonna tell you where because I don't want y'all to jinx me. But I'm still kind of deciding if I'm gonna stay in guard or not because I don't feel like driving back and forth. It ain't that far from me, but like I used to always tell people, you need more black cops. You need more Mexican cops. This is more of a California specific conversation. When I lived in Alabama, there's all the damn black cops in the world in Alabama, so it's nothing new. But as far as California is concerned, I said you need more black cops. If you feel there is a problem, if there's a disconnect in between the law enforcement community and black communities and Latino communities in California, then you need more of us. You need more of us to stand guard because what is happening, and I mean no disrespect to anybody from law enforcement that grew up in a small town. I kept telling y'all what's happening is our COs, our sheriffs, and our cops, they're pulling them from all these goddamn small-ass, country-ass little towns in California that have never dealt with Latinos, that have never dealt with blacks like that. They don't know how to talk to us. They don't know the culture. And they'll come and have them come work in the sheriff's office. They'll come have them work the streets. Now, here's my full circle point. If you feel so pissed off that there's a disconnect, the problem starts there. There's one guy, a recruiter from CHP, from California Highway Patrol. And he was telling me, he's a black dude, really cool ass black dude. He was like, bro, like, we need more. He's like, bro, we need more blacks. We need more blacks. And I'll be trying to get more of us to come, bro, but none of us apply. None of us apply. Like none of us, we just really don't fuck with the field. And I keep telling him that's the problem. Like, that's the problem. Like, you have people that are not from the communities policing these communities. It makes no fucking sense from a man from Harold or Islington is being sent to Oak Park, Sacramento and dealing with people there. Now, if he passes background, he's a solid law enforcement officer, then he should, for sure, 100% if he should. But when you start talk about the disconnects that might happen, this is part of the reason why those disconnects, because you're hiring people that aren't from the community. And this kind of goes back as saying it's our fault because we're pushing this narrative where people in the community are reluctant to apply. People in the community are reluctant to try, but you can't. When people were talking about that whole defund the police thing, and I'm obviously biased on this because I aspire for law enforcement, but when people were talking about that whole defund the police thing, I used to always say, if you went to East Oakland and you went to the worst neighborhood in East Oakland and you said, hey, we don't fuck with the cops that much, we're going to defund the police and get rid of the cops. If you did that tomorrow, the community is still going to need some form of protection. Some form of protection. Who the fuck gonna protect it? Who the fuck gonna protect it? I can tell you the homicide rate in Oakland has risen. It's for surely risen. It's risen. One of the offices that we do security at in Oakland, we had a situation a few months ago where our guards had to pull out their guns on somebody. It's for surely risen. So that's not a place where you don't need some kind of form of protection. I've always felt like it's how you handle racism is you get in the system to change the system. That's how I say. You get in the system to change the system. That's why I have so much respect for that woman who was like 3 years ago, the commissioner of CHP was a black woman. Much respect to her. And one thing I can say is, I don't know if she was pushing it, but I can just tell you that since she was a commissioner of CHP, I've ran into so many black CHP officers. I ran into so many, and I appreciate that because I feel like that was her getting off. Maybe just the way she was recruiting, but I did see me push a lot of people. How I'm seeing so many black people, not so many. How I started seeing just a little bit more black people go for CHP is how I feel when I saw so many Mexicans starting to be CEOs. There's a lot of Mexican CEOs. There's a lot of Mexican CEOs. And at the end of the day, hey, if you felt there was a problem in the system, if you felt like there was an unfair treatment of Mexicans in the penitentiary system, hey, Now, one can argue, hey, if you have more black cops, if you have more Mexican cops, that don't mean that you're not going to still deal with racism, because what if they become a part of the system? I ain't going to hold you shit. When you go to Alabama, listen, when you go to Atlanta, and much love to Atlanta, at least 70 or 60% of Atlanta's police force is black men. And I can tell you, I've seen videos where they for surely was not doing a damn job well. When you talk about that situation in Memphis with the Scorpion Squad, who beat up that man, that black dude who was a skateboarder. And it was very cruel video. It's the craziest shit I ever saw in my life. Like, them motherfuckers need to be killed. Let me not say that, but they don't need to have their job. But it's not to say that just because you have more black officers and more Mexican officers, you'll have more fairer treatment, not for sure. Because you're always going to have people who do not do that job. You're always going to have people who do not know how to deal with people at all. I can tell you, even at my job, like I do federal security, I can tell you, we for sure have some coworkers that do not know how to talk to people. They do not know how to talk, do not know how to deal with the public at all, for sure. But the idea is that if you did have more in these roles, you do have more black CEOs, you do have more black CHP officers, you do have more than this, a lot of these things wouldn't be a problem. Is racism a problem in this country? Yeah, of course. But it's not a problem enough to where you can't be a minority and open up a business here. If that was the case, that damn Indian guy who owns that gas station off of Cimarron, who owns those 2 dental offices, he wouldn't be able to function. Is prejudice a problem? Yeah, but it's not going to stop you from getting a good job here. And one of the things that makes me proud to be American reality is there are a lot of places you can go to where your race, your creed, your tribe can stop you from all of that shit. This goes into a conversation with the DEI thing. Do I think you should have DEI initiatives at this point? No, not really, because I feel like it does kind of incentivize for you to maybe pick for candidates who might not be as qualified to have the job, and it does cause problems to a certain extent, in my personal opinion. I do think when you had those DEI initiatives pop up at first, it might have made sense earlier time, because back then, a lot of those rooms, they wouldn't let you in, if that makes sense, unless you met a certain quota. We are in one of the laziest fucking times in America. I feel like Americans are the laziest that we have ever been in our entire life. So I don't think you need the DEI shit that much, because everybody's hiring. Everybody's short-staffed. So I don't think the DEI was necessary just off GP right now. Like even me trying to go for a police department right now. Like, I signed my job offer, but like back in the day, those of y'all who were cops can tell you, like back in the day in the early 2000s and 1990s, if you wanted to be a cop, there were a lot of veterans who couldn't become cops, who were solid dudes, decorated, etc., etc. But back in the 90s, early 2000s, it was hard to get on. Versus nowadays, it's not as hard, because everywhere is short-staffed. Crime is running wild. So when you talk about the history of racism in our country, do I think it's important to talk about it all the time? No. But at least some of the time, for sure. Because contrary to what a lot of y'all think, slavery, racism, genocide, this all still happens in the world. This also happens in the world. I hate as Americans that when we talk about racism, slavery, etc., we act like these are foreign concepts that only existed 2,000 years ago in the time of Alexander the Great. Bro, no, this is all shit that still happens. When you go to Africa right now, there's still modern day slavery in Africa. There is still modern day slavery in Africa even now as I'm talking to you right now. So if it can happen there, what do you think can happen here? Just saying. I am happy, proud to be American. I do think we've made more progress than goddamn at least 80% of the countries in the world, for sure, in terms of social dynamics. But you don't maintain that progress, in my personal opinion, without saying, hey, we have to remember certain. I could make this a whole long conversation about immigration, etc., but I'll just say this. Even when you start talking about the immigration issue, the migrants, I do think we need stronger borders. I do. Whenever we talk about stronger borders, people solely think of Mexicans. I'm not talking about Mexicans. I'm talking about in general. For those of y'all who do not know, when you deal with the border, you have a lot more people crossing that goddamn border than just Mexicans and Central Americans. Arabs are coming from there. Illegal Indians, the ones who couldn't afford to go to college, they're coming from there. I keep bringing up that report to y'all, but none of y'all pay attention. That report the Department of Homeland Security put, I want to say this was like last year, early January, where they said that 400 individuals were smuggled in through the southern border. And these individuals were smuggled by the assistance of a group connected to ISIS, the Islamic terror group. Some of y'all remember ISIS. You know, they were really big. They were a really, really big terrorist organization in the Middle East. Bring that up because I don't like that. I'm not cool with that. I don't want motherfuckers getting smuggled in here by the assistance of terrorist groups. I got an issue with that. That's just me personally. Y'all can say what you want to. And if you start talking about that, there are a lot of people, a lot of Latinos, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of Mexicans in this country, they get a little bit sensitive when you talk about that, because when you start talking about the border issue, et cetera, whether you're legal or not, it always feels like Latinos are the main ones being targeted. And to talk about the history of racism in our country, there was a time where we did something really fucked up to Mexican Americans. Some of y'all know about the story of the denaturalization of Mexican Americans during the Great Depression. That was fucked up. We don't talk about that enough. That was really fucked up. Like, I wish more people would talk about that. But, so, it's not illegal to be racist in this country. It's not. Not illegal to be racist in this country. You can be American and be racist. It's a lot of Americans that are racist. A lot of Americans that are prejudiced. It's a lot of Americans that are racist. It is what it is. That's just the game. That shouldn't stop you from making progress in your life. That's why I have so much respect. I have so much respect as I get older for black veterans, particularly the ones who served in World War II, even though none of them are left. The ones who served in World War II, served in World War I, even to Vietnam, because it takes a lot of patriotism, to go to war for a country and come back home and still get called the N-word, still be locked out of certain rooms, still be refused services. It takes a lot of patriotism to work like that, to have the mentality like that. It does. As a black American, as an African American, I always tell people at the end of the day, man, this is our country, you know, and black Americans, we gave a lot of blood and sweat equity to this country. We did. We fought in every major war this country had. A lot of our uncles, great-grandfathers, I found all my grandfathers and great-grandfathers World War II and World War II draft cards. World War II and World War I draft cards. We were patriots, fought in all of these wars, still got called the N-word, still got denied, still got treated weird, etc., etc. It's kind of like sometimes as a black guy, sometimes you kind of walk a weird line, because like, we're proud to be American, we're proud to be from here, but at the same time, we can acknowledge the country's done some fucked up shit to us. Where we operate in a weird space as black Americans is because at least from my family, we have a history of giving our life and giving our loyalty to the country and still getting fucked. This is when you talk about the Buffalo Soldiers. This is when you talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. This is when you talk about all the wars. Even when you talk about black police officers. Like, being a black police officer, that's not a new thing. You've always had black cops, and you've always still had racism against those black cops. Like, it's not a new thing, but it's weird. It's weird. Anyway, that was my rant for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I can't wait to see you guys' comments here and see what y'all was talking about. So, much love, peace and fingers. Thank you for being a part of the family. Thank you for being a part of the mob. It was great talking to y'all. Shout out to all y'all who listen.